Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. My name is Il Chang-hee, and I'm Senior Research Coordinator at United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or UNRISD. I am in charge of the Alternative Economies for Transformation program. For those who are not familiar with UNRISD, I will briefly explain about UNRISD and its research and activities on the social and solidarity economy. UNRISD was established in 1963 as an autonomous research institute within the UN system. And the mandate of UNRISD is doing policy-relevant cutting-edge research on social development that is pertinent to the work of the United Nations Secretariat, regional commissions, and specialized agencies and national institutions. UNRISD has a long history of research on social and solidarity economy. One of the first researches we did was the research project of the 1960s, which was entitled Rural Cooperatives and Related Institutions as Agents of Planned Change. It is a rather long title. And since then, UNRISD has continued its research on the core values and principles of SSE, such as genuine participation, democracy within and beyond organization, and redistribution. Since 2010, UNRISD has been designing and implementing various research projects, specifically focusing on social and solidarity economy, or SSE. And since 2015, the research has been about how SSE contributes to achieving the SDGs and how to develop the enabling environment or policy ecosystem to promote SSE as a means of implementation of the SDGs. One of these researches is the guidelines for local governments on policies for social and solidarity economy, which has been conducted in collaboration with GSEF. I'd like to invite Lawrence Kwok, Secretary General of GSEF, for her opening remark of this session. Lawrence, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yu Chang-lee. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. It is my honor to welcome you all, eminent participants and speakers, to this section on promoting social solidarity economy through public policies, guidelines for local government at the 2021 Global Social Economy Forum in Mexico, which is in fact organized virtually, especially for this section. GSEF is an international network of local government and social solidarity organizations working to promote social solidarity economy as a means to achieve inclusive and sustainable local development. We are present in 36 countries with 81 members. Among them, 32 are cities and local governments, and 48 social solidarity economy networks and organizations with 1 individual member. As I understand, this section aims to look at the role of local government as the cornerstone of sustainable local development through social solidarity economy public policies. We will learn from authors of 7 city cases, as well as Hamish Jenkins, author of guidelines, to share about the core ecosystemic approach of public policies developed by various cities to better understand what is the potential of such public policies to promote social solidarity economy, and also to exchange best practices developed on the issue. As we all know that awareness about the role and potential of social solidarity economy to promote inclusive and sustainable development grows, especially in current context on the debate for the strategy to build back better from dramatic consequences of COVID-19 pandemic and to address worsening inequalities and poverty in all countries. We are currently witnessing an increasing number of governments, both at national and sub-national level, are adopting policies and programs to support social solidarity economy as an essential means to address economic, social, and environmental challenges. At the same time, growing number of policymakers, international organizations such as UN, ILO, OECD are paying their attention to the value and potential of social solidarity economy as one of the most viable alternative policies to ensure more inclusive and sustainable development in the post-COVID-19 era. As the UN Secretary General said in his report, in fact, social solidarity economy is present and active in all sectors of economic activities, represent an alternative model of growth aimed at finding a new balance between economic efficiency, social and environmental resilience. The ILO, for the first time in their history of 102 years, has decided also to discuss about the role of social solidarity economy to promote decent work at their 110th general section of the International Labour Conference, which will be organized in June next year. With COVID-19 pandemic and unprecedented global crisis of health, public services, and employment, many local governments are in fact very interested and eager to learn more about the public policies of social solidarity economy, and also are requesting a lot of capacity building training programs to GSEF. Even in this year that we have conducted 3 major online capacity building programs for the countries of French-speaking countries in Africa as well as in Europe. 2 weeks of training for English-speaking countries of East Africa, and even from Monday of this week, that we are also conducting a training program for the government officials from Philippines. Our experience showed that despite of growing interest and political will of many local governments to better understand ecosystem approach of social solidarity economy public policies, still they feel very great challenges to really integrate and design relevant and adequate policy framework for social solidarity economy, and especially to integrate it into societal and governance process of the local government. And I think especially in absence of legal and policy framework for social solidarity economy, which are actually crucial preconditions to develop and to promote public policies of social solidarity economy, it is very understandable that many actually officials of local governments do encounter great difficulties and challenges on how to go about and how to actually bring forth of what they are learning and what they have been trained. So I think that I'm sure that today's section with eminent speakers from 7 city cases, as well as Hamish, who is the author of the guideline, will also enlighten us about what are the very important elements that we have to remember when we are trying to co-design and implementing public policies, especially in partnership with social solidarity economy actors within systems and framework of broader local development policies. And I hope that to mainstream social solidarity economy public policies to play a key driver of the transformative territorial dynamics, common challenge faced by us, but also it gives a new vision and new horizon for the social solidarity economy, really to contribute for the transformation of our society and our economy. It would be crucial today at this section that through the different and diverse 7 city cases to explore to what extent and how it can be connected more efficiently and organically at the local level, with this aim of generating a broader and deeper understanding of the necessary policies and institutional frameworks for the development of robust social solidarity economy system, especially at the subnational level. I sincerely thank to all speakers of the section, and particularly UNRISD team, with our special thanks to Il-Chang Lee to organize this important section at this very critical time as part of global dialogue, exchange, mutual learning and self-organized section of GSEF 2021 in Mexico. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Florence. Thank you very much for your kind words as well. Today, we are with authors of 7 case studies, which provided basis of policy guidelines to promote SSE at the subnational and national levels, and authors of the guidelines, which covers all the important areas of policies to promote SSE. We have Roberto Canedo, who wrote about Mexico City, Sang-Yun Lee about Seoul, Republic of Korea, Malik Diop and Aminata Diop about Dakar, Senegal, Rafael Chavez about Barcelona, Susan Steinman about Durban, Alan Surden about Liverpool, and finally, Margie Mendel and Nancy Nimton, who wrote about Montreal, Canada. And we have invited Hamish Jenkins, the lead author of the guidelines. We will have presentations of Mexico City, Seoul, Dakar, and Barcelona first, and then Q&A on these cases. After a short break, we will have presentations of Durban, Liverpool, and Montreal cases and the guideline. And then we will have Q&A. Before we invite the first speaker, I'd like to make an announcement about a couple of housekeeping matters. I think it may be too late to let you know about this, but this session is going to be recorded and published. If you have any concerns or issues concerning recording and publishing this session, please let us know during the session. And if you have questions or comments, please leave them by using Q&A function at the bottom. This session is simultaneously translated into English, French, and Spanish. Please click on the globe symbol at the bottom to use translation service. Now, without further ado, we will go for the first speaker, Roberto. The floor is yours. Roberto.
Muchas gracias. Si me permiten proyectar.
Thank you very much. I'd like to share a presentation with you, please. The speaker requests permission to share a presentation.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Bueno, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This work is called Policies to Promote the Social and Solidarity Economy, Case Study of Mexico City. It was prepared for the project of the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development on promoting SSE through public policies, guidelines for local governments. This study shares the experience that we have lived here in the city of Mexico. It shares the features of the design and implementation of public policies aimed at promoting and consolidating social and solidarity economy. It covers the period of 2016 to 2019. We should also mention that there are key prior events that frame this type of policies in the city of Mexico. It goes back to the year 2000. However, it was not until 2007 that specific programs were implemented, programs of the Ministry of Labor and Promotion of Employment, known as STIFE. The goal was to promote and strengthen local cooperatives with budgets which were indirectly coming from different institutions of the federal district government, which is today the government of the city of Mexico. It had its own budget between 2012 and 2014, and there was a cooperative promotion, a program rather to promote, strengthen, and integrate cooperatives. And this was promoted with 157 cooperatives 2,442 people were involved, and this was followed in 2015 with a support program for the development of cooperative societies in the City of Mexico. It continued also in 2019 with a program for the promotion and constitution of social and solidarity companies. And these are the programs that we're referring to in this study. Now, moving on to the next slide, the speaker says there is a problem. The speaker is going back to the previous slide. So the methodology was developed in 3 stages. First of all, there was an exhaustive review of existing books, articles, documents, laws, regulations, legislative debates, and in particular, the rules of operation of the different programs mentioned above. And there were also calls that were made and evaluations of these programs through the official Gazette of the Federal District in 2016-2017 and the official Gazette of Mexico City. The second stage was the gathering of data. This involved key informants such as officials and former employees of the agencies, managers, partners of the different cooperatives, as well as instructors accredited by the Ministry of Labor and Employment Promotion and different scholars. The third stage was to process all of this data, to analyze it, and then to write up our key findings. Now, the next slide. So what are the main findings? During this study, the main finding is that the public policy to promote SSE in the City of Mexico is maintained by a legal and institutional impetus, and this was a result of pressure from existing social demand. There's also a subsidiary or complementary independent element of the general social policy of the City of Mexico, and these were mainly programs targeting unemployment. Between 2015 and 2018, the modest results that we found were somewhat clouded by shady management, and this includes both officials and beneficiaries when it comes to the resources. So since 2019, the program and the public policy took a significant turn by introducing highly centralized procedures for its administration to combat corruption. What happened was a massive dismissal of personnel and then the failure to re-employ trained instructors to cover this initial failure. So as part of the Republican austerity policy at the state level, only 16 members of staff were employed. And this led to a very small amount of personnel to be able to achieve the goals that were set out. So the institutional structure was overwhelmed by the magnitude of the demand. The goal was achieved very quickly, but the way that the cooperatives were formed was flawed. This suggested that very few can actually survive even in the short term. So in fact, the goal was not achieved. The main finding is that FOCOFES, mentioned above, lacked a strategic precision or clarity of goal. The people who were responsible for implementing it did not guide or channel its innovative potential for social and solidarity economy. So instead of implementing a public policy, what happened was that they limited themselves to comply with the formality of the administrative processes rather than a constructive dialogue, and therefore did not meet the quantitative goals and did not worry too much about the full strategy. Therefore, the current legal framework is not complied with, which is why there is a lack of harmony between the progress made in the city's constitutional text and its legal contrast with other ordinances.
Con la Constitución local, así como una reforma integral de la Ley Federal, la Ley de Fomento Cooperativo del Distrito Federal, que entre otras cosas posibilite el aterrizaje de las normativas en las alcaldías. En noveno lugar, la forma como...
Now, moving on to number 9 on the slide here, the way that the programs have been implemented is not adequate. It's not based on an objective diagnosis of the conditions in which cooperatives carry out their business activities. There are not sufficient studies or analyses, and there's an absence of a working dynamic of the existing institutions. Therefore, the task that can no longer be postponed is that the need to prepare an updated directory of existing cooperatives in the City of Mexico and of those supported by the ministry. What we need is to create an updated and reliable register of cooperatives, which can be available in both physical and digital form and freely accessible to the general public. Moving to number 10, what we see is that the way that programs are operated is excessively rigid and too short-term. Therefore, all administrative processes should be simplified and made more flexible, less complex, and less bureaucratic. We should use digitalization of procedures, and we should deliver the documents in such a way as to streamline them so that we can publish them online and ensure that the responses to requests from cooperatives are made available and transparent in the use of public resources. Now, what are our recommendations? So this study recommends that we carry out fewer home visits, so that it's essential to establish a type of geo-referencing, if you like, for each cooperative that is a beneficiary, so that their status is updated in real time. We should also try and overcome this institutional short-term dynamic by perhaps developing multi-year programs that allow us to reach longer-term goals, perhaps in a period of 5 to 10 years. We could create a core group which is solid and consolidated, with several dozen cooperatives that could be created to fulfill this role. We also need to limit the struggles that we witness in the management of these institutional spaces. We see continuous changes of high-level officials, and this leads to an inability to create consolidated work teams between middle and operational managers. So we need to put an end to this lack of coordination between different public entities who are involved, particularly at the level of the City of Mexico and the local governments of 16 mayors' offices. Number 5, we recommend that we find a way to guarantee that SSE promotion programs are no longer subjected to this clientelistic management of quotas for power groups. What we recommend is that in the coming years, the focus is placed on more qualitative aspects rather than quantitative aspects through training and technical support, for instance, by training cooperatives and strengthening them. And the 6th recommendation is to ensure that the programs are permanently analyzed, and that we provide feedback and provide key elements such as training, technical assistance, financial support, access to markets, dialogue with the cooperative movements overall, and to disseminate these programs and their achievements. Thank you very much for allowing me to give this presentation. Back to the floor.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and especially thank you very much for keeping your time. And our next speaker is Sang-Yun Lee, who is going to talk about Seoul case. Sang-hyun, you have 15 minutes, and I will give you the signal 3 minutes before the end of your time. Sang-hyun, the floor is yours. Sang-hyun,
Right.
we cannot hear you.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
All right.
you.
Thank you so much. All right. Hopefully you can see this slide. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me to present Seoul case. I'm Sang-hyun Lee, who is professor at Seongonghae University in Seoul, South Korea. A special thanks for Il-chung Lee and Lawrence Kwak to invite this great event. I really appreciate. This is Seoul Han River, which is the best season to visit and travel. So hopefully you have a chance to visit South Korea. This is the order of my presentation. I'll briefly look at the situation of South Korea, and then I will focus on the measurement and policies of social economy in Seoul, and I will conclude as special remarks. All right, South Korea is located in between China and Japan. So, historically, there are a lot of conflicts among the countries. We do have 15 million in South Korea only, but in terms of Korean Peninsula, we do have more than 8 million lives here. South Korea, well, we heavily rely on the export in terms of economic activities. As you can see here, number 50 in terms of exporting. We do have a lot of business partners, including United States and Vietnam and Japan and etc. As you can see here, China, as you can see, is the number one partners in terms of foreign trading. Well, semiconductor industry is a major area in terms of business sector occupied by Samsung and SK, which are big jabbers in South Korea. As you can see here, historically, South Korean economy grown so much rapidly. As you can see here, for several decades, our GDP and GNI and exporting growth is dramatically, right? This actually leads inequality and lots of social problems. For example, 10 jables in South Korea occupy more than 40% of whole GDP, which leads inequality in terms of wealth. And top 10% of people can occupy more than 45% of whole wealth in South Korea, which leads a lots of social problems, as you can see in the soft drama of a Squid Game. Moving to the social economy sector in South Korea, this presentation is based on the working paper by UNRISD. Especially thanks for the Dr. Lee Il-chung for this great project. As you can see here, South Korea has a variety of social and solidarity enterprises, which is based on specific legal framework. As you can see here, the basic cooperatives such as agricultural cooperatives, credit union, and consumer cooperatives is based on the specific legal framework or statutes. And so you can see here in 1999, there are National Basic Living Security Act is passed in 2007, Social Enterprise Promotion Act in 2012, Framework Act and Cooperative. And after Moon Jae-in president, and he actively promoted social and solidarity economy policies, not legal based, but as government policies actively boost this area. And now the Framework Act on Social Economy is under review. 5 bills are so far submitted, but it is under review right now. These 4 types are the major policy target: cooperatives and social enterprises and community enterprises and self-reliant enterprises, which are based on specific legal framework as well. This is the act under review, as you can see here. But lawmakers haven't yet passed this act. So hopefully this act to be passed in nearby soon. In addition, Ministry of Labor also actively support how to educate social entrepreneurs. So far, as you can see here, more than 3,000 enterprises are created since 2011. The act under review defines social and solidarity enterprises, as you can see here. So 5 of yours are submitting right now that I mentioned before. 13 organizations are, the special cooperatives and general cooperatives, credit union, etc. So those are, we assume, social and solidarity enterprises. Now we are moving to specific policies to boost the social economy in Seoul. As you can see here, Seoul is in the middle of a Korean peninsula, and so far more than 4,000 clubs are created, which are basically run in the area of social services, education, and housing, etc. More than 10 million people live in Seoul metropolitan area. So that means a lot of people create a lot of problems socially and mentally and culturally, right? So that is one of the reasons why social enterprises are created so rapidly in this metropolitan area. This is not just happen in the one night. As you can see here, the city of Seoul actively promote or create a legal framework for the social economy. As you can see here, it started since 2009. And as you can see here, in 2014, the framework ordinance on the social economy was, I think, a typical or transitional point to boost social economy in Seoul. Maybe others think differently, but I would say this ordinance is really critical part. This is not just driven by, Seoul government, but by cooperation with the private sector as well. After former mayor Park once to the office, he actively worked with a civil actor, so that the team created so many wonderful and creative policies for the social economy. So again, this is not just driven by the city of Seoul government, but by cooperation with the public and private partnership. I think intermediary organization is important to boost and deliver specific policies and information to the sector. So as you can see here, Seoul Social Economy Center was developed, I think, 2010. I'm not so sure exactly, but anyway, in that era, this center was set up and actively played the key role to boost and develop a social economy sector in Seoul area. But there are 3 major initiatives, I would say, to boost social economy sector in Seoul. First, human resource development for educational program. Secondly, financing capital is very important to start business, as you know. And information asymmetry issue is quite huge in this sector because the concept is quite hard to understand to the people or citizen, right? So I think the key is how to reduce information asymmetry. Between policymakers and citizens and business players. I think that is very important issues. So far, the Social Economy Center in Seoul provide lots of educational program, more than 45 courses. And through these programs, I mean, more than 7,000 persons are educated, and, you know, so educational program for social entrepreneurship, how to start a business, how to get the resources from outside is quite important. You know, my university, which is Seonggonghae University, is also one of the agencies for these educational programs. So we actively learn this program, and so far we educate more than 1,000 people, and so far I think more than 100 social enterprise are created by this program. Financing, again, very important. So, well, we do not have much money, right? As you know, but money talks sometimes. So set up social investment fund, as you can see. So through this fund, more than 1,000 social enterprises get the loan from this fund. This is a really key role. I mean, to create and to build and to boost social economy sector. More importantly, local government should play a key role to buy something from social and solidarity sectors or enterprises, right? So we do have a legal framework for this, I mean, in terms of Seoul level. So as you can see here, since 2014, the volume, the size is getting increased, as you can see here. For the information asymmetry issues, City of Seoul set up the information hub to access all kind of information, including educational things, consulting services, human resource development, and recruiting, etc. So set up this kind of online web platform is also one of the important, drivers to boost, I think, social economy sector.
You have 3 minutes left, Professor.
All right. Well, so far so good. So actually, before new mayors are take the office, the city of Seoul actually suggests plan 2 for social economy, but I'm not so sure this plan is continued or not, because the new mayor may have a different approach for economic issues. So we will see. As conclude remarks, well, rigor and institutional framework important, especially in Asian context. I argue that because, historically and traditionally, Korean government played a key role to boost the economy, and people are very, very adjust or familiar with that approach. So I think if your culture norm is similar to South Korean, I think, first, legal and institutional framework is quite important to start. At the same time, the autonomy or independence of social enterprise are also important, especially if the local government is not friendly with that organization. Those 2 factors are really, really important to sustain. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave at the comment at the chatting box. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sang-Yoon, for keeping your time and wonderful explanations about policies in Seoul. And our next speakers are Malik Diop and Aminata Diop, who are going to talk about the case of Dakar, Senegal. Malik and Aminata, the floor is yours.
Je vous remercie. Je suis Madame Diop. Je suis Aminata Diop Sam.
Thank you very much. My name is Madame Diop. I'm the Director General of the Municipal Fund, a structure which funds a platform for training actors in social and solidarity economy, focusing on women. I think that we can now share the presentation with you on the screen. I can share my screen with you, unless you have the presentation there yourselves. I can do this directly from here, says the speaker.
D'accord. Donc, la présentation se fera en 2 étapes.
So this presentation will be divided into 2 stages.
Donc, pour cette présentation, ça se fera en 2 étapes.
So, as I was saying, I will present the first part on the experience of the city of Dakar on conceiving, interpreting, and evaluating public policies for SSE cooperatives. The second part will be presented by Mr. Diop, the coordinator of the network, with whom we worked on this study. So let's talk now about this experience in the city of Dakar. First of all, I would like to share with you the context of the study in this first slide. Now, at the time of this national study, the context was favorable and enabling to the development of an SSE ecosystem. The government of Senegal had put in place a ministry dedicated to SSE in 2017. And this ministry was able to follow up on CCE with different actors. There was a legal framework which was developed, as well as a cross-sectoral policy letter and a framework law for SSE. These were all developed within this institutional and legal context, allowing to better organize the governance of this sector. There's also a dense network of socioeconomic initiatives at the local level, but also at the national level. For instance, in Dakar, we have a network of initiatives that promotes the training, creation, and financing of SSE actors. At the international and national level, there is also a strong political will to accompany, to follow up with SSE actors. Now, looking at the city of Dakar and how SSE were accompanied. Let's look at the next slide. Since 1990, the city of Dakar has been fully involved in accompanying SSE actors. There are several programs in place. I just wanted to share some of them with you. There's a program to support families in extreme poverty, which was implemented in 1998. We also have a solidarity fund in place, which I am directing myself. Our mission is to accompany, train, and finance SSE actors. We also have an urban agriculture project. The goal, therefore, is to support women who wish to invest. And this has been a very important project and has led to critical results. Young people were recruited, trained, and they are currently working in a very positive way within the city of Dakar. These are SSE actors who co-organize as a cooperative, and this is how we are able to ensure that SSE is dynamic. These actors are trained and financed by the city of Dakar. And what we have is an entrepreneurship incubator. Social entrepreneurs are trained by the city of Dakar. And what the city of Dakar has done is to ensure that we implement this entrepreneurship incubator and also a financing mechanism. All of these projects are part of our public policy for social and solidarity economy. Now, let's talk about some of the constraints that we had in terms of following up on SSE. Of course, we felt a lack of coordination. This was one of the main constraints. When it comes to following up on these SSE actors, we noticed that there were many projects across the city of Dakar. However, they're somewhat disparate. So we noticed a lack of coordination, and we noticed a weakness in the legislative and regulatory system of SSE, although this is now being corrected with an orientation law. At the national level, we noticed that there's a lack of human resources, and this can only be bridged by training actors. It's very difficult to follow up on these SSE actors, particularly because of a lack of financing to support these different mechanisms of SSE, which is why the city of Dakar has implemented this triad approach, whereby we create, form, and finance these actors. So the city of Dakar has committed to promote this SSE program by ensuring that there are financing mechanisms that are linked to SSE actors. The next slide, please, on decision making. Of course, decision making is a key aspect, and we must discuss this. At the national level, we have a ministry, which I mentioned above, the Ministry on Social and Solidarity Economy, and they're currently developing a framework law. Malik will discuss this further. Now, on the city of Dakar, when it comes to decision making, at the political legal level, we're currently debating budget guidelines and a code. At the strategic level, we are discussing a planning department for sustainable development, and at the operational level, I've already discussed this, the different structures that we have, the different funds and entities that are funded by the city of Dakar, such as these different structures that support housing cooperatives, for instance. However, what we've noticed is a lack of local planning, which is why we have established a responsibility center to ensure that local governments are able to implement SSE. So the next slide is the support of organizations of SSE. Here too, we need to underline how we have been supporting the different organizations at the national level. The government has established several financing mechanisms and follow-up mechanisms that I've mentioned before. And you can see the acronyms on the slide, as well as, for instance, global health coverage. At the local level, the city has also set up decentralized support structures to follow up on SSE, and also a support fund for the financing of these organizations of SSE, and to ensure also that the process of eligibility is simplified. And we have implemented capacity building through this triad approach that I mentioned before: training, finance, and supervision. Now, we do have another constraint, which is access to the market, because we feel that there's still a lack of proper incentive framework to facilitate access to public procurement, for instance. And we notice as well that there is a lack, or rather, there are several financing structures in place. However, they are not fully adapted to the everyday reality of SSE organizations. Therefore, we're somewhat limited by this when it comes to promoting social and solidarity economy. Moving on to the next slide, when it comes to data gathering and research, here we need to highlight that we did not establish a systematic way for gathering data and thereafter for research and sharing the knowledge on SSE at the national and city level. So why is it that we were not able to do this? It's because there is a deficit when it comes to financing these experiences, so-called capitalization deficit, if you like, and also because of the weakness of statistical data. Practically no statistical data is available at ministry level or at the level of financing mechanisms. Next slide, please. So what are our recommendations based on this study? First of all, our recommendation is to integrate SSE in local level public policies through the development and implementation of local strategies to develop SSE.
Aminata, you have 3 minutes.
Also to coordinate projects and support structures by centralizing decision-making through a department focused on this. And we also have to establish and support SSE poles at the level of municipalities, as well as strengthen the mechanisms that exist for creating and establishing relationships with SSE organizations and social enterprises. My colleague will continue with the next slide. So looking at some of the impacts of this study, the first impact is the development of an orientation law. There are some sound issues. We will follow the slide. First of all, this orientation law allows us to define the reference terms or the employment terms for the SSE sector, especially those aspects that were not taken into account in the past, but this orientation law now allows us to do this. We've also created measures and customs measures for the benefit of SSE actors. We've also ensured that we're able to frame people's economy through this law and to frame corporate social responsibility
Malik,
by taking into account the considerable impact it has on the population. And just to finish off, to round up now, there are many impacts of this study when it comes to the legal framework. What we notice is that local authorities must include an SSE program in their planning document. This was one of the main impacts. And this has also really helped us to promote the city's candidacy at the national and international levels through this study. Because through this study, we were able to involve different actors from the ministry because they were, through the study, able to better understand what the city of Dakar is doing in terms of social and solidarity economy. Thank you very much, and back to the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry to push you to finish your presentation within 15 minutes. I think it is almost impossible to talk about all those details within 15 minutes, but please understand the situation where we are, more than 10 speakers. Sometimes it's quite difficult to manage the session. Our next speaker is Rafael Chavez, who is going to talk about Barcelona case. Rafael, the floor is yours.
Muy bien, pues muchas gracias, Il-chung.
Thank you so much, Il-chung. I hope you can hear me okay. Yes. I'd like to begin by thanking the Global Social Economy Forum for the opportunity to speak at this seminar and for the relevance of this seminar on public policy in local governments. Particularly like to thank Sen-Yong Lee for being the catalyst for this type of seminar. And obviously, Il-chung, I would like to thank for organizing this seminar. It is a true pleasure for me to have worked and collaborated with other groups of researchers across the continents of the world. I would also like, and this is very important, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak in Spanish. Thanks to the new remote simultaneous interpreting technology, I can speak in Spanish. So new technologies are enabling this. Not many other conferences have enabled me to speak in my mother tongue. This therefore helps us to add to the wealth of our contributions. I could obviously speak in a different language in English, but I'm extremely grateful for being able to express myself in my mother tongue in Spanish. So I'd like to quickly share a presentation with you. And here we have my presentation on the case study of the city of Barcelona. It's not my own work. I worked with two other people, Jordi Villa, Jordi Garcia, and of course the third person was myself. When I was commissioned to carry out this study project, I am a researcher and university professor in Valencia, but my colleague, Jordi Villa, who was the driver of these studies of leadership and policy change, and I've been working with him for many years, and he was delighted to work with me. And Jordi Garcia is also a renowned local thinker on the progress of social and solidarity economy and economy. And then I invited them to work with me, and they were delighted to accept. Therefore, this is a partnership. We've been working alongside. They did not just provide data and information for the study, but they participated in every single stage of the development and preparation and final drafting of this report. So we're talking about co-participation, co-creation when we talk about this report. As to the methodology, how did we gather all the information so that we could build this case study? Well, first and foremost, we have the wealth of personal knowledge of Jordi Villa, who is the commissioner for the City Council of Barcelona. And he therefore could provide his knowledge and know-how to help us with this. He's an open mine of knowledge, but we had to collect much information from other official documents, from the city council, from social movements. And at the same time, we organized two focus groups. One focus groups with representatives from the City Council of Barcelona, from various different departments, and the Generalitat, the regional council, and the various different social and solidarity economy movements from the city of Barcelona. They were extremely enriching and rewarding exchanges. We had slightly different scripts for each two focus group, and they provided us with an insight into how they saw the progress of social and solidarity economy. We also carried out questionnaires, surveys to evaluate the public policies undertaken with the focus groups and the participants. As to the assessment period, it began with the very first plan and policy to promote the social and solidarity economy of Barcelona. A second was also approved since then. And at present, we have a Barcelona 2030 strategy for SSE. So the very first pillar was placed back then and since then, since laying the foundations, we've seen a development of public policy in the city of Barcelona, in fact, across the region of Catalonia. But we're going to focus on the period from 2016 to 2019. So the presentation will be a summary of the paper that we published, but we will first look at the vision of the promotion policy of social and solidarity economy of Barcelona. So we will be looking at SSE and its implementation, but also the approach and the methodology. Then the process of building the impulse policy to promote SSE in Barcelona, and we will look at how this was created and built and how the stakeholders came together. Next, we look at the ecosystem of the social economy policy, which institutes, which stakeholders participated in the creation of this policy. Then we'll look at the institutional and regulatory framework of the policy in the city of Barcelona. Next, the sixth element is the architecture of our social economy policy. So what does this mean? What instruments were used to organize this? Lines of approaches, instruments, policy approaches. And number 7, we'll look at the evaluation of the social economy policy, because this was an essential plank of the organization of the policy from the outset. I know I have very little time, and I'm sure that Il-Chung will tell me suddenly I have only 3 minutes, so I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can. First and foremost, it's very important to underline the fact that the Barcelona city policy is not unique in Spain. In Spain, we have a great tradition of social policy going back to 1978, with the transition from the Franco dictatorship to the democracy. The constitution drawn up in 78 urged local governments to implement social policy. And therefore, social economy has been a central part of the measures and initiatives undertaken by local governments since then. But I think that there was a specific turning point in 2015, after the financial crisis. In various different cities and regions, a new generation of social economy policies were introduced, many of which were very similar in appearance, although we could look specifically at the case of Barcelona, which I believe to be the city that has most successfully developed this type of social economy policy within this new generation of policies. But we've seen it in Madrid, Valencia, Aragon, and many other regions of Spain. So first, when this policy was first developed in Barcelona, the first thing was to look at the scale and scope of the social economy in Barcelona. There is a sector with nearly 5,000 initiatives. So these are entities and enterprises in the social economy, and many of them, nearly 30 of them, are cooperatives, but we also have social and labor enterprises. We have non-profit organizations. We're talking about thousands of jobs in our city. This is about 88% of the working population of Barcelona work in the social economy. So I think that this is a very significant part of the economy of Barcelona. If we look at the breakdown by districts in the city of Barcelona, it is not distributed equally across the city. I think that this is a similar situation as we have seen in other countries, wherein the poorest neighborhoods, those that have less, have fewer of this type of social economy initiative. I think this is a very important aspect to take into consideration when we develop this type of policy. So when did this policy first begin? 2015, there was a change of government. We had local and regional elections across the whole of Spain. In Barcelona, the elections were won by a left-leaning coalition of parties. The new lady mayor of the city of Barcelona decided, for the very first time in Spain, decided to implement a social and solidarity economy at the local level in the city. and then a social movement activist, someone who's been working in cooperative enterprises, Jordi Villa, who's my colleague, at that time, he created a specific department, which was the Cooperative and Social and Solidarity Economies Commission, the Commissionat. And their role was to implement a cross-cutting new approach to policy in the City Council of Barcelona. So if we look at the vision of the promotion, the policy to promote SSE in Barcelona, first and foremost, it was a broad vision that really went beyond any traditional view of social economy in Spain in traditional terms. It included non-profit sectors and other social and community initiatives and brought them all together. And this therefore created an entirely new type of approach. The idea was to raise the profile, raise awareness, and to make everyone aware of this great transition towards a new model of economy. And then we looked at the instruments and the general objectives of this new policy. The objectives were first to develop the existing initiatives in place and then to involve all the different sectors, so it's cross-sectoral, to bring about a transformative approach to our economy.
Rafael, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And another of the overarching goals was to try to mainstream this approach, working in a cross-cutting manner with the different departments of the City Council, bringing on board other different stakeholders in the co-construction process. And in fact, one of the significant contributions was the creation of a new mechanism, a participatory space, a space for the participation of SSE stakeholders so that they could all contribute to the creation of this new policy. So how was the policy developed? Well, we had the co-decision and co-construction approach, we had the participatory approach, and we had a short period of time, only 6 months altogether. But a plan, a multi-year long-term plan was created with 2 major general objectives, various different lines of work, 24 specific objectives, and 31 actions. So this means a whole range and whole array of different instruments, including education, training, communication, outreach, equipment, and regional district breakdowns. So we had all of these various different approaches and actions that were going to be developed over a specific period of time. Now, I don't have time to break it down fully, but I would like to underscore the importance of the evaluation and also the fact that there were certain obstacles along the way. This is one of the tables that we used in the assessment process. We measured the degree of implementation of this wide array of different measures. We've also analyzed the difficulties when implementing these and also how we overcome all of the problems. So what are our conclusions, therefore? First of all, our first achievement was the fact that we contributed to increased public funding for SSE. Okay, I will conclude here. Greater visibility, greater awareness of this new sector, establishing a stable space for participation in the public policy for the social economy. And finally, for the very first time, we have been able to create a convergence of all the various different sectors under one roof, social and solidarity economy. In fact, what we have done is we've created a platform for social and solidarity economy in Barcelona. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafael. Before we open the floor for Q&A, we prepared one surprise event. that is group photo of all of you. So could you turn on the camera and try to show the best part of you? And our staff will take a photo of all yours, and we will give you that photo as a souvenir for participating in this event. So could you turn on the camera, all of you? Hi, Akiko. So I assume that all of you with camera, turn on your camera yourself. So maybe we can take a group photo. 1, 2, 3. Un, deux, trois. Okay, thank you very much. Now we will open the floor. And in this event, GSEF 2021, we have common questions for all those speakers and participants of all sessions. That is, what should be the actions or strategies of individuals, governments, groups, societies, countries to achieve a better and more inclusive world? That is one question. And the other question is, what key actions should be promoted from the local level? I think both questions are very much forward-looking questions. And maybe we can rephrase those questions a little bit because our presentations are based on existing policies. Maybe we can rephrase those questions like, what were the actions or strategies of individuals, governments, groups, societies in your area to achieve a better and more inclusive society in your local area? And what key actions were promoted from the local level in your area? Maybe we can choose one of these 4 questions, 2 forward-looking questions and 2 historical or backward-looking questions, and answer those questions. So maybe I can ask that question to Roberto first. Roberto.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Now, in our study, we worked alongside Ms. Juan Jose Rojas and other colleagues, and I'd be happy for them to participate in this segment. Yes, I will. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to all. So to respond to Il Chong's questions, and I hope that I have well understood them, I would also like to say that from what I've heard from the other presentations, I'd like to underline certain aspects that I believe to be essential in the promotion of social and solidarity economy in the city of Mexico. First, I would underline the aspect of co-construction, the processes of co-construction involving the various different stakeholders, because these stakeholders undertake a very proactive role in the vision and the implementation of public policy. So really, if we look at public policy creation in the city of Mexico and if we gave our insights into it, I would say that we could break it down into 2 parts. First, we have a stage of great participation, particularly participation by cooperative enterprises. And this was mainly between 2015 and 2016. And this was the period during which we achieved the creation of the new law, a law to promote cooperative enterprises in the city of Mexico. We created institutions at this time, and this helped us to lay the foundations for the creation of social and solidarity economy in the city of Mexico. So I think that we could qualify it as a great success. We've been able to involve many different sectors and stakeholders, and we've been able to gravitate together around a new approach to the social economy. And then after 2015, the government took a unilateral decision to cancel and to put off all the work that had been done. And they decided from that moment up to the present day to specifically focus public policy in the local government authorities. And I think this has created a problem. In fact, Roberto underscored this, because we do not have the properly equipped and properly trained staff. We don't have a legal framework in place. The target populations are not being reached out to. And these are problems that have been repeated over time since then, mainly because of inertia, because of the existing systems, and also I think because of vested interest on the part of political policyholders. And I think that there has been a very passive approach by policymakers. And I think this has slowed down the approach, because we need to create greater knowledge for people in our city. And if we did this and we involved more people, made it more cross-cutting, we could have a much more realistic take on what we need to do. So I think what we have in the city of Mexico is a bottleneck that is hard to get through. There is a growing demand from social economy actors, a demand to resume the work of an advisory council. In fact, this is an advisory council that is laid down in the law on cooperative enterprises passed by the government. But the problem is that the policymakers have crossed their arms and simply not taken action on this area. So I think, therefore, we are at a crossroads right now. And we have not been able to progress anymore. We need to overcome these obstacles to dialogue. We need to create greater cooperation so that we can work through greater cooperation between public policymakers and all other social stakeholders. There is a social interest and there is a social economy that needs the support. Therefore, we need to be able to open the whole process up to dialogue. And this is an issue that I would like to underscore for all of you. Thank you.
So we have a willingness to promote SSE on the ground, but political leaders do not seem to have that kind of same level of willingness to collaborate or cooperate with civil society. I think that is the problem, and we have to be very much persuasive in getting support from political leaders. And maybe we can go for Sang-Yun. Do you have anything to answer those questions?
All right, thank you for the opportunity to say something. I'm educator, or I'm teaching at university. So in terms of teaching for social entrepreneurship and to boost social enterprises, I think sometimes bad theories or bad policies, which are usually masked or disguised, kill good practice. That means, our management theories are based on capitalism or, the capitalistic enterprises. For example, resource-based view or transaction cost theory or agency theory are all assumption is based on human beings are totally fine for self-interest or, but in this sector, the assumption may not work quite well, but sometimes when I observed or see some enterprises or some educational program, well, it is too much commercial logic or something without any kind of a thought or consideration. They just accept commercial logic or commercial theories from the capitalistic approach. Well, so it is necessary sometimes, but we need to consider sometimes bad theories or bad policies which are masked are killing good practice. That is the one thing that I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of pressure on academics, researchers. We need to develop very solid and good theories and concepts to promote SSE. Okay, let's go for Malik and Aminata. Malik, Aminata, can you hear me?
Oui. Oui, à mon niveau, je
Yes,
pense qu'il faut encore renforcer
I think that we need to strengthen solidarity, given that we're talking about social and solidarity economy. When I speak of solidarity, I'm referring to solidarity when it comes to producing and consuming goods. There needs to be an equitable sharing of benefits, as well as solidarity across territories. For instance, when we say that one country is rich and one country is poor, I think that we need to strengthen the relationships between these countries. In terms of strategy, the city of Dakar has promoted its own strategy, which builds on two elements. On the first hand, strong planning, whereby all SSE actions are well planned, together with the organizations of SSE within the city of Dakar. In addition to planning, we then also need specific financing mechanisms to support these actors, such as classic finance mechanisms, where I'm referring here to banks, where they're not taken seriously, where they're not necessarily able to provide the necessary guarantees, which is why we need to establish very specific mechanisms that accompany these SSE actors. And we also need to strengthen synergies within networks. For instance, we have a network for local collectivities. Therefore, we wish to strengthen the coordination between these networks and different SSE actors. It's about co-building, therefore, here at the level of the city. And then just to finish, we believe that training is key, because SSE actors are active, but they're not necessarily always fully well trained. So we need more capacity development in SSE. Thank you. Back to the floor.
Thank you very much. Creation of alternative mechanisms to support SSE organizations and enterprises, training and co-construction processes. Okay, let's go for Rafael. Rafael, do you have anything to answer those questions?
Sí, claro. Gracias.
Yes, indeed, I do. Thank you, Il Chung, for the opportunity to take the floor again. I really enjoyed listening to Sanjung's sentence on how bad theories can bury good practice. I would turn this sentence around, and I would say that a good theory can be practical. There's nothing more practical, in fact, than a good theory. As Il Chung was saying, it's up to academics to construct good theories. And I'm not only saying this here in this small group. This is my opinion overall. And I just very briefly like to give you 4 different elements that I think are key to developing public policies. First of all, visibility and recognition of SSE as a field. Those of us who are here already clear on what SSE is, but we are a tiny minority, and therefore we, the very actors, need to fully understand what it is that we're talking about. We need to understand what this umbrella term means, but public authorities also need to understand what SSE means. Some of us had made much progress through this institutionalization of the term, but this is not the case everywhere. One of the main pillars of SSE public policies in Barcelona was to ensure that there's recognition and awareness raising on what SSE is in its most ample of terms. The actors themselves needed to recognize themselves as SSE actors under this umbrella term, and they needed to understand that there is a collective project and strategy that includes all of them. This is the cornerstone of our approach to build upon. Second point, we need finance. Of course, we can make progress based on our goodwill, but it's not sustainable if we do not have access to funds. We need to have generous financing, and it needs to be long-term financing. Otherwise, we won't be able to achieve much. Third point, but okay, maybe I'll leave it here because I see that Il Chung is letting me know that time is running out. Beyond training, what we require are proactive people who are at the forefront of these policies, who work hand in hand with decision makers in SSE and hand in hand with government agents. I'm referring here to people who have a strong imagination and a strong will to promote SSE, to articulate policies and move in the direction needed to implement these. So these were just some of the fundamental points that I wished to highlight. Of course, there's also social innovation that is required in addition to this. Thank you, and back to the floor.
Thank you very much. I mean, as you know, I wonder whether you know this, but the UNRISD, our institute, is the poorest institution within the UN system. And I always talk to my colleagues that if UNRISD is recognized and visible in development discourse, there will be a money. So finance is very important issue. You know, everybody talks about finance, but as Rafael said, if SSE is recognized and visible in various sectors, and if we have people with strong will and strategy, we will find money. So finance is at the bottom of the agenda from my perspective. Thank you very much. And now we have to close the first part of this session to have 10 minutes tea break. And I hope you enjoy toilet and coffee or tea, whatever. And we will see you again after 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Hi, Susan.
I'm good, and you?
Very good. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm prepared. So I hope I can keep within that 15 minutes. It's quite frightening.
Exactly. My signal is much more frightening. I'm very sorry in advance.
Chung, the session finishes at what time, and how much time is left?
We have 1.5 hours left.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, I think I'm first on after this break, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So welcome back, everybody. Could you turn on your mic and camera and cry out, "We are here." Okay, great. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the second part of this session. And without further ado, I will go for our first speaker in the second session, second part of this session, Susan Steinman, who is going to talk about case in Durban. Susan, the floor is yours.
Okay, very good day to everybody, and to you, Il Cheong Chi, I hope I pronounce it correctly, and our moderator, the speakers, and the audience here, and my appreciation to the UNRISD as well as the GSEF. My name is Dr. Susan Steinman. When I started the research, I was a professor at the Northwest University in South Africa, but now I'm affiliated to the GIBS, the Business School of the University of Pretoria, as a research associate. The case study deals with the city of Durban in South Africa. Now, let me just start sharing. I wonder, okay, there it is. Sorry for that. So let me start sharing. Firstly, it is about creating an enabling environment for the social and solidarity economy through public policies in Durban. The facts about Durban, I just want to see. The facts about Durban. Durban is situated within the eThekwini municipal metropole. In Zulu, eThekwini means a bay or a lagoon. It's the third most populous city in South Africa, and the headquarters of the eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality is situated in Durban. It's got 3.44 million inhabitants, making the combined municipality one of the biggest cities on the Indian Ocean coast of the African continent. Durban is the second most important manufacturing hub in South Africa. Johannesburg, of course, being the first. Just quickly referring to the methodology, it was a case study, and I'm not going to say, you asked looking at the slides, so I'm not going to stand still there for a long time. The areas covered was, of course, an overview of the SSE in South Africa, the synergies at national, provincial, and local level, and it all refers to the also to the legal framework. So there's a coordination between the ETMM, or the eThekwini Metropole, and Durban and other levels of government. Capitalization on existing enabling policies, and there are many, and connecting to institutions of government agencies in general by the eThekwini municipality. In Durban, the identification of key stakeholders in the case of Durban, all levels of government, identifying policies, institutions, the local government or municipality of Durban, the role it plays as a catalyst, interacting with the stakeholders such as the DCCI, which is the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, universities, government agencies, and so on, planning by local government, putting strategy together, financing, marketing, training, and capacity building, scaling up, and networking, and monitoring and evaluations. Now, looking at the main findings and recommendations, the SSE in the case of this study includes the non-profits and social enterprises. These are governed by the NPO Act of 1997 as amended, and also the Companies Act of 2008. The cooperatives are, of course, governed by the Cooperative Act 14 of 2005 as amended in 2013. The informal economy is not really governed by any piece of legislation. It's really governed by ordinances of the different municipalities. And these ordinances differ from city to city in South Africa. And of course, we're also looking at the Trust Property Act, the Act of also the Companies Act of 2008, and also the Cooperative Banks Act. So all of these play a role in the SSEOs included in the study. So the size of the SSE in South Africa and Durban, and this is the bone of contention, because when we look at the stats provided by the government department of South Africa, it is estimated that the size of the SSE in South Africa, in terms of entities, not real size in terms of capacity and so on, and people employed, is estimated to be between 16 and 18% of the total of all active registered economic entities. It's not accepted by some people, and there are people at the moment trying to gather information to establish, but unless it really gets fixed at the level or government level, we will not really be sure how many entities are there in South Africa and the real size of the social solidarity economy. So policy development, if we look at policy development, the policies cascades from the national level to provincial level and to the local level, almost forming a value chain, and there is to and fro cooperation to get the policies into starting to work. So each level add value to each stage, from design to implementation to evaluation. So, for instance, national government in South Africa will develop these policies. The provincial legislature develop policies. It's a broad plan for all the municipalities to follow to achieve the objectives and goals of the legislation. And the local government develops the implementation strategies, often just referred to as strategy or guidance, which is localized, detailed, and practical plans on how the provincial strategy would be applied in a specific local or cultural context. So, South African Constitution acknowledges that there is 3 spheres of government, and this is very important, and they are distinctive, interdependent, and interrelated, meaning that these are autonomous, but they cooperate in decision-making, budgets, policies, and activities, especially cross-cutting issues related to policies, programs, strategy, and setting up guidelines. This is being undertaken through the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act, which was passed in 2005. Now, custodianship. See, I made a mistake, a spelling mistake, my apologies. No, I didn't. The Department of DSDBD is the Department of Small Business Development, is the custodian of the SSE. But there's different, and this is unfortunately, the national government is the custodian, but when it comes to the provinces, one of the interviewees contended that everybody does as they please. It's not so, but other government departments also run cooperative programs or social enterprise programs, or even programs for your non-profit organizations. And they are also involved in interpreting and drawing the strategy from the provincial strategy. But this can put the principles of, for instance, cooperatives at risk. There's not enough time to cover that. So the intergovernmental relationships, the relationship between the various levels of government departments are consistently defined as cooperating with one another. I pointed to that earlier. Then there is at the moment a draft green paper on the social economy. And this draft green paper still needs to follow the usual procedures on more consultation, interrogation, and thought before it becomes a white paper and it can be signed into an act. So there's still a lot of debate around this, but there is an urgent need for social enterprises to have a separate legal framework, and this paper tries to conflate a policy for the social economy and the establishment of the entity of social enterprises, which is often hybrid organizations or enterprising non-profits. So at the moment, looking at that financing, SSEOs face difficulty accessing funding, especially your cooperatives, but your non-profits, your social enterprises too. Government funding and government agencies are a bit more lenient towards them. Non-financial support is often provided by all agencies, in the case of Durban, by the municipality, a lot of that incubation, assistance with admin, and with life skills even. So, because if you look at the following point, conflicts is of course a huge problem, and there are problems around, and this is also taken care of very often by the municipality of Durban or the eThekwini Metropole. Looking at motivation, there is problems for the social enterprises in terms of proximity and transport, and all of these the local government try to overcome in their way. International cooperation.
You have 3 minutes left.
Oh, okay. There is international cooperation. I'm not going to stand still. The labor laws, there is this problem of synergy in terms of the principles and constitutions of cooperatives and the labor laws in South Africa. I think you can read through that. It is a very, it's a challenge that needs to be addressed. Training contributes to the success, and there is training provided not only by the ETMM, but also SEDA, the Social Enterprise Development Agency of South Africa. There is also by the Durban Chamber of Commerce. They're introducing life skills. There is streamlining and consultations is ongoing, and this is one of the great functions of the city of or the eThekwini ETMM, but also the city of Durban, that there is a lot of consultation and a whole process of consultation on co-constructing policies in going forward. There is also the role of universities, that universities play is of great importance. Also, policy is that there is solidified relationships with service providers. Marketing is difficult for the SSEO. The ETMM provide these, the SSEOs with linkages and strategic alliances to the retailers in the area. Procurement, the ETMM targets the SSEOs specifically for procuring for the municipal services. And these are the building blocks of sustainability in a lot of these cases, a lot of non-financial support, incubation.
Susan, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, and it's connecting the municipalities. Okay. Enabling local government policies, or a lot of that. You can read through it. And the informal sector, the DCCI set an example by involving the informal sector, for instance, in disaster management, getting food to the people. That was the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry. There is technology and commercialization. We need to get the SSEO in the fourth industrial revolution, and already the universities are working and having a strong focus on this. So in conclusion, some challenges need to be addressed on national level together with the provincial legislature and government in reducing red tape and streamlining it. and specifically for the remains in the hands of the local government to connect the stakeholders. However, the ETMM or Durban is an exemplar in promoting cooperatives through the creation of worker cooperatives within the municipal services area. Likewise, the DCCI, the Durban Chamber, is an exemplar of cooperation between the SSEO and the private sector. That is the pockets of hope and brilliance that I found in the study. Local universities and government agencies in the area are actively engaged with the ETMM in promoting the SSEO. There's always room for improvement, but the city of Durban is indeed creating an enabling environment for the SSEO through public policies and their co-constructing the policies with all the stakeholders in this area. I hope that's 15 minutes exactly.
Thank you very much, Susan. Now we are going for our next speaker, Alan Surden, who is going to talk about Liverpool City case. Alan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let me see. Just bear with me for a moment, please.
Susan, could
Susan,
you stop
have
sharing?
to stop sharing.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes. I need to stop sharing. Let me just say.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Okay, so I'm Alan Southern. The work that we've been doing on the social and solidarity economy here in the United Kingdom in Liverpool City region is with my colleagues Helen Heap and Matt Thompson. And together we've been active researchers, but also activists as well in terms of helping develop if you like, a cohesive response to the challenges that are facing the social economy in the Liverpool City region. And hopefully over the next 15 minutes, I'll be able to think about what sort of public policies can enable the social and solidarity economy and how public policy has shaped the social economy in Liverpool City region, just look very briefly at what it is like, and then think about how public sector policies and plans can enable further developments of the social economy in a city region like Liverpool. The first thing to start off with is when we consider the national framework in the UK for the social economy, is that there's an absence of legal form for the social economy or for social enterprise. Social enterprise is often the term that's used to describe the organisations in the social economy. It's limited in that description, but that's because there's no legal form really for the social economy, and that really puts it at a disadvantage. Having said that, you know, often the kind of legal form for small businesses is problematic in the UK as well. And in general, business legislation, company law is what determines the operation of small businesses or those socially trading social economy organisations rather than public policy. And that's mainly been designed to support larger organisations. And we see, you know, in the economy, small businesses, social enterprises, social economy organisations often are at a disadvantage in the economy. I'll mention a good example of that in a moment. And that kind of ethos of deregulation, which has accompanied many of the Western countries, and certainly the UK. The UK's been at the forefront of it for over 40 years. And that's been really aimed at the for-profit sector, deregulation to kind of encourage profits and investments. And you know, it's no accident that in the UK, the growth over the last 40 years has been in those financial institutions in the southeast of the country. This national framework took a particular turn really for the social economy in the mid-1990s under a Labour government, and that was known as the New Labour government and led by Tony Blair. And their kind of ideals around the third way, this notion of neither market nor state, this third way, opened up the door really for for the social economy, but for a particular type of social economy. And this is where social enterprise start to emerge, and the Departments of Trade and Industry provide a definition of what a social enterprise is, not a legal definition, but just a kind of working narrative. And as part of this new Labour third way, it opened the door for privatisation. And I'm talking about privatisation of state services, such as in social care and healthcare. And the aim was to encourage charities and third sector voluntary organisations to become more professional and turn into social enterprises and start delivering services instead of the state. Much less attention was paid to the operation of the social economy in private markets, and there was little concern with solidarity and democratic ownership, which was a different position from the Labour government, who had encouraged worker cooperatives from the 1970s onwards. So it was a real kind of cleavage in the way that the Labour Party saw the social economy and cooperatives. So much so that many cooperatives were encouraged to change from being a worker cooperative or a community cooperative towards a social enterprise. The national framework, however, over the last 10 years has produced some interesting aspects on which are directly affected the social economy and which has encouraged the social economy. So we had the definition of a community interest company, which was a means by which social enterprise could lock assets in and ensure that they weren't sold off at a later date. So, typically if there was an asset held by a social enterprise, let's just say, for example, a building, then that could be locked in and couldn't be sold off by a community or anyone acting on behalf of that community. New legislation came into work with cooperatives, particularly something called BENCOMs, community benefit societies, and they were to encourage community cooperatives and to raise shares, community shares, to raise finance, really, or sweat equity as well often. So, people could take part in a community cooperative and have a stake in that. And worker cooperatives as well were kind of champions, but much less so. There was a change in charity law as well, as the Charitable Incorporated Organisation came on board, really to lessen the administrative burden upon charities who were hit with a double whammy of being seen as having to supply business information and charity information. The other significant piece of legislation that came roughly about 10 years ago was the Public Services Social Value Act. And that encouraged all public organisations to search for the social value in any procurement or commission. Then there was devolution, and Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all developed some form of parliament, limited form of parliament in some respect. And in England, as part of the devolution deal, came city region governments, and for Liverpool, it came the Liverpool City Region in 2016. So very recent. So just turning to Liverpool and what it's like. This is a map of Liverpool City region. You can see the river running through the middle of it. And it's a population of about 1.6 million, of which Liverpool City is the largest. There are 6 district authorities, all Labour held, and the combined authority, which was established, sits alongside. It's not a hierarchy, it sits alongside. And the Metro Mayor, who was elected from the 1.6 million population, is a Labour Metro Mayor. And this is a city region that suffered economically since the 1970s. And just last year, it was at the centre of the public health crisis, the COVID-19 public health crisis. It's from about, last March to this time last year, it suffered enormously. And that's undoubtedly related to the levels of poverty that are in the city region. The history of the social economy in the city region is one of philanthropy, charitable trust, cooperativism, mutualism and trade unionism. Now that river gave us, huge wealth, often related to the slave trade, and from that came charitable trusts and philanthropy. Some of the UK's biggest charities started in the Liverpool City region. It also gave strong syndicalist tendencies in the trade unions. Moving on, in the latter part of the 20th century, while the economy was restructuring, community development, housing cooperatives emerged, and there was a big housing cooperative movement in the city region, much different from anywhere else, only probably similar to some parts of London. Objective 1 funding from the European Union was provided, and that's because Liverpool was seen as a very poor place. And post-2010, the austerity that the UK was put under, there was a distinct response from the social economy. In some respects, it was radical, and in some respects, it was very entrepreneurial. So we could come to the present day, and in 2016, some of our research, we did a kind of an account of the social economy. We found 1,400 trading organisations in the social economy in the city region. We've done some figures up to update that we estimate, rather than we know for sure. There's around about 2,000. A lot of these have struggled in the past 18 months. And we know it's a kind of sector that's got substance to it. Yeah. And, you know, the persistent poverty that existed in the city region has been one of the kind of reasons why there's been a response in the social economy. We see it at work in education, housing, health, social care, art and entertainment, some recreation. These are the kind of areas where it's strong, the industry sectors. And when we look at this map here, we see where those social economy organisations are located. These are ones that trade in a social way, and they claim grants, but also enter into markets of some way. And, you know, the red areas are the poorest places in the city region, and the dark green areas are the most wealthy places. So the very dark green on the west, for example, is where a number of billionaires live, for example, and it's just, you know, in close proximity really to Liverpool city centre and other parts of the city region where there's high levels of poverty. And now look at those, where those are. There's a story, and there's something there to be explained in terms of that relationship between the presence of social economy organisations and poverty. And it needs more explanation. We know market failure, and we know the retreat of the state, privatisation, historic position of housing cooperatives, for example. We know that's in the mix, but there's more to be told on that story. So what do we do?
3 minutes left.
Okay, so how do we use public policy to enable the social economy? Well, we've got to use, you know, our agency. We've got to kind of exploit the evolution and work towards the needs of the social economy by working in collaboration with the public sector to build up a narrative really about the social economy. Things like the Social Value Act can be exploited much, much more for the social economy through procurement and commissioning. This is what we've seen today, other people have mentioned it. And also place-based regeneration initiatives can encourage particular types of social economy organisation, such as community business asset transfer, for example. Much more of that can be made of. We can also see already in the last 5 years, we've established a social economy panel as part of the governance framework of the combined authority. We've influenced the plan for prosperity around inclusion and fairness, but not in areas like how we achieve carbon neutral, how we engage with the fourth industrial revolution. We need to do more on that. Kindred is a social investment vehicle, the first of its kind in the country, where it's a social enterprise itself, a KIC, community interest company, that's raised £6 million, 5 million from the combined authority, and is now distributing favourable investments and finance to the social economy organisations. And the Land Commission, again, a first in the country, has got ideas about asset transfer and social value with the community at the centre. So the social economy, it needs better organisation, it needs stronger support, it needs greater levels of democracy and accountability within the sector. These are to be achieved. It needs greater level of diversity. The Black and minority ethnic communities have some great social economy organisations. They're marginal to this debate that's going on. They need to be incorporated, and we need to kind of develop the next level of leadership through young people. We need better forms of finance and social investment. Kindred is one example. It needs much more. We can look at Montreal and see how they finance their social economy in this way. We've got to target better and encourage new startup as well as growth of existing social economy organisations. Some concluding thoughts for the very last minute, Ilchong. There's a Conservative national government and local Labour leadership. It's often problematic and it's not always cohesive. It's a weakness, devolved governance, executive authority remains with the national government. National privatisations and a reduction in income that local authorities have is a problem, much less resource to deploy. We have a social economy that remains undercapitalised and understaffed. It's made up of mainly smaller organisations. They fill the gaps where once public services existed. And we need to break out of that and think how do we move into private markets and address some of the global challenges. Challenges like climate destruction, social and economic inequality and public health. The social economy is primed to respond to those sorts of organisations. But this is an enormous challenge. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Breed. Okay, let's go for next presenter. Margie and Nancy from Montreal. They are one of the leaders in Montreal to promote and grow SSC organizations on the ground and in Montreal and Quebec areas. So Margie, Nancy, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Il-chung has kindly accepted to manage our slides because we are two of us and we were worried that we get messed up trying to sequence our slides. So Il-chung, if you could please begin our slide share, that would be great, very helpful. And while he's doing that, let me just pay tribute to our third author, co-author Hunai, who's in Vancouver. And so it's 6:15 in the morning, much earlier than Nancy and I turned our computers on at 7 a.m. She is a former researcher with cities in Montreal. So she was our co-author. We can go to our first slide. I can't resist following Alan to just say that apart from the social and solidarity economy, Liverpool gave us the Beatles, and Montreal gave the world Leonard Cohen. So we share that legacy. Could you please give us our first slide? Following this one, please. Thank you. Before jumping in, let me just say that what is missing in our slide presentation is just some brief data that we'd like to share with you, and that is that Montreal, there is the metropolitan region of Montreal, and then there's the island of Montreal. The metropolitan region of Montreal represents approximately 4.2 million people. The island of Montreal, 1.9. It is the second largest city in Canada. The population of Quebec is 8.5 million, so roughly half the population is in the city of Montreal. The social and solidarity economy, the statistical office produced data in 2016, represented roughly 67,000 jobs and approximately 3,000 enterprises in the social and solidarity economy. What's interesting is that 75% of those were nonprofit enterprises and 25% are cooperatives. Canada is a federation, we have a constitution, and provincial governments have the responsibility and the mandate for municipalities. So, a sort of dark view of that is that cities are really seen as, or municipalities are seen as residual. But the paradox in Montreal and in cities around the world is that even with restricted jurisdiction or juridical powers, the responsibilities for Montreal and other cities have increased exponentially in the last, I would say, 20 years, particularly in the last decade. And so Montreal really is really subject to or implementation of derivative policies that emanate from the federal government, and in some cases with limited experience at the level of the federal government. What is important in Montreal, and I go back to what Il-Chang said earlier, that there are obstacles to dialogue with policymakers. I would say that in Montreal and in Quebec, that the social and solidarity economy is rooted in social dialogue and co-construction and collaborative processes, without which I don't think we would have achieved the position of the social economy in Quebec or in the city of Montreal presently. And that collective action and knowledge mobilization and experience sharing and so on the ground is really at the heart of the social and solidarity economy. Next slide, please. In addition, the social and solidarity economy in Quebec and in Montreal is embedded in an ecosystemic approach. Actors in the social and solidarity economy have, over the years, created enabling tools, finance, technical support, accompaniment, research, training, knowledge transfer, citizen mobilization, commercialization. We talked about good and bad theory earlier. Well, this is good theory. These are examples of place-based, comprehensive, and integrated approaches to local development, very different from old-style exogenous approaches of inviting investment in and then hoping for the best results. So in this context of place-based and integrated approaches to local development, we often say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is a development strategy which is beyond the aggregate of its numerous collective enterprises. We are really, I think, an example of co-construction where stakeholders have continuously played a very strong role in the development and scaling of the social and solidarity economy based on needs, but also on aspirations. And I think this is a really important point because we see increasingly more and more young people that are attracted to the social and solidarity economy. This co-construction has also is also evident within government as there is more horizontality across different divisions of government and also more vertical integration between municipal, provincial, and federal. I mentioned earlier the federal is rather limited. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, good theory, bad theory. We wanted to add this figure that some of you might be familiar with, which we produced in other publications, to demonstrate that as we conceptualize what is going on, theory is strategic. We need to theorize what we're doing in order to demonstrate that this has capacity to generate wealth, to generate jobs, and to generate, in the context of our concerns, social inclusion and sustainable development. In this diagram, you can see that on the right-hand side, going vertically along that bracket, is the need for coordination between different levels of government to make sure that policies are aligned between local, regional, and national government. On the left-hand side, you see co-construction, the intermediaries that exist within, or the networks within the social and solidarity economy that need to dialogue, co-construct with all three levels of government. We added in supranational because in the context of Europe, you have the European Union, but I'd like to focus on the international network and how important that is. GSEF, the fact that we have this event and that we have this international organization that brings together SSE actors as well as local governments and institutions around the world means that we have enormous capacity for knowledge sharing and knowledge mobilization. And these are leverages. We leverage what we each do and bring them into our own context. But next slide, and before I turn over to Nancy, I just want to mention some milestone derivative policy measures that have been really important. This is a list. They are outlined in detail in our paper. The Social Economy Act, our framework legislation, was passed unanimously in the National Assembly of Quebec in 2013. We have since had a few government action plans for the social economy, one in 2014, one in 2017, and the most recent one passed just recently for the period up to 2025. The National Statistical Portrait of the Social Economy of Quebec, to which I referred earlier, which was published in 2019, is extremely important because we now have data on the social and solidarity economy, which until this time has been primarily anecdotal. I'm going to hand it over now to Nancy to give you some examples of municipal policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So I'm going to talk to you about what's actually gone on in Montreal. And I think it's important to note that the first official, we didn't call it a policy with the city of Montreal, was in 2009. And the different measures that we've gone through different administrations, 3 different administrations in the city of Montreal, all of which have been engaged in social economy because of the importance and the support from social movements. I think, could we go back? We went a little bit too quickly. So the first major one is really set the tone. It was the tone in which this co-construction has taken place, in which we basically signed a partnership with the city of Montreal that recognized that the social economy helped the municipality carry out many of its important responsibilities vis-a-vis citizens, be it through housing, through sports and recreation, be it through access to culture, and so on, and social integration. And therefore, the role of the city, and therefore, in return, the city was to support the social economy because it was really a mutual support, and that was all co-constructed. And that allowed the creation of the Social Economy Office, which still exists today within the Department of Economic Development. Now, as the years went by, there were different specific initiatives. In 2013, the whole issue of procurement came onto the agenda, and there was working with the City of Montreal and the social economy networks, because in Quebec we are very networked, and in Montreal there's a network of the social economy. Next slide. But there's also been a lot of investment in enterprises and in real estate. For example, we have a network of local development organizations whose mandate, run by the city, whose mandate is to support small and medium-sized businesses. So the social economy is integrated into that. There are funds available, both small subsidies, but also investment. Within the whole response to housing, we have had a very strong network, and the City of Montreal took on the responsibility, which was provincial before, to support a response to housing needs, particularly through the cooperative and nonprofit model, therefore social economy. But there's also been other kinds of new innovations in responding to housing. Within the issue of food policy and food security, there has been very important partnerships with networks of social economy enterprises to reduce waste, to deal with places where people didn't have access to healthy food. So this is another place where the Montreal food policy has worked closely with social economy actors. Next. Social economy has been integrated into a vision of social innovation and entrepreneurship, so that obviously has a place in there. The question of affordable housing, as you said, there's been several measures, but I think it's also important to see that there's been a lot of investment in community infrastructure. We reached out to the City of Montreal and to the Quebec government many years ago to say that it was important to invest in social in physical infrastructure, but also in social infrastructure, and also and this has allowed all kinds of very innovative financing.
You have 3 minutes left.
Okay, and I will go, and also at many various sectoral policy initiatives, as I mentioned, in both in emerging sectors and more traditional sectors. Next slide, please. Okay, more recently, there's been some things since COVID. I'll go very quickly. Procurement policy. Next slide. Increased procurement policy. As I say, more community housing. There's been accelerated growth in there. There's also a very interesting new initiative that came out of the student movement. Young people that created a new fund and are building cooperative housing by mixing public and private financing for student-owned cooperative housing. Next. And again, I don't have time to go into everything. Community bonds. There's a lot of innovation that's going on, but I'll take the last minute or two that I have to go through the lessons. So next slide, please. So the lessons learned, and as Margie brought them out, that for the success of the social economy, and it has always been our marque de commerce is the importance of an ecosystem, an integrated ecosystem approach that includes finance, research, knowledge transfer, accompaniment of enterprises, and so on and so forth. And that ecosystem has really been built based on partnerships and co-construction. So right from the beginning, it was always considered to be a partnership. And the first issue was recognizing the importance of the social economy in the lives of Montrealers. And obviously, what has mobilized and continues to mobilize young people, but I would also say civil servants and certain of our politicians, is the fact that social economy is really seen not isolated, but as an overall part of an ecological and social transition in urban setting. And in that sense, it is rooted in citizen mobilization alliances with social movements. And I think the best news in all this is that because it is rooted in these social movements and this vision of transformation, that young people are attracted to the social economy as a component of, in this context. And I would say that one of the important parts of research that has been done over the years and roles of people like Margie Mendel and other researchers integrating this into universities means that the new cohorts of young people that are coming to the social economy, some have a wide range of skills. And so we have architects, engineers, and all kinds of skills that are coming to the social economy to help it build and expand over the coming years. So I think I've probably finished all my time. I don't think that's the last slide, yeah. So we are certainly open to discussion, but this is an ongoing story, as I say, and the future is linked to the partnership between the municipal government and with the actors of the social economy that are mobilized and rooted in community and in places.
Thank you very much, Nancy and Margie. And all these 7 case studies provided kind of bones and meats to our guidelines. And I'd like to invite the lead author of the guidelines, Hamish Jenkins. Hamish Jenkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Il Chong. Thank you to all the presenters of the case studies that I had the pleasure to study in depth. So I'm just going to try and find my presentation. Do you see it?
We can see the message like a Jenkins. Yeah, we can see that.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so well, it's my pleasure to present the guidelines for local governments on policies for social and solidarity economy, which was the result of about a year's work. So the objectives of these guidelines is to provide practical guidance to policy makers, especially at subnational level, to develop and consolidate public policies to enable actors within the social solidarity economy to establish themselves, grow and prosper for the common good within their territories in the best possible conditions. So the target readers for this publication are, of course, government officials that have an interest in promoting SSC within their territories, SSC practitioners and advocates, scholars, sorry, it's gone a bit quick, and other stakeholders. So the procedure for these developing these guidelines was first to interview a number of key local government officials to assess their specific demands and needs for these guidelines. And as mentioned, it was also the result of distilling the main elements of the different case studies that we just heard. So the basic idea was to mirror the let's say the structure that was asked of all the different authors to have a sort of common template from which to extract public policy recommendations around complementary angles that should be ideally advanced in concert to genuinely scale up and sustain local SSC ecosystems, taking into account very diverse political and cultural contexts. So the first chapter after the introduction is looking at the co-construction of public policy for SSC, which provides guidance on how to establish and manage diverse processes and a wide range of mechanisms and approaches for the co-construction of SSC policies and plans between governments and SSC actors. The second chapter looks at legal frameworks for SSC, introducing various legal institutions that regulate and support SSC at international, and by that we mean global as well as supranational, national and subnational levels. By subnational we mean regional, provincial as well as municipal, and explains different pathways to creating and developing these legal frameworks. Thirdly, we looked at mainstreaming SSC within wider development plans, and this explains how SSC can be incorporated into development plans and programs at different levels of government, and establish SSC-specific development plans and programs, which can either be standalone or synergized with the wider development plan of the territory. Fourthly is supporting organizations for SSC. The chapter looks at different trajectories for the development of supporting organization of SSC, whether we're talking about government organizations with specific mandates to support SSC, intermediary organizations engaged in the co-construction of policies and their implementation, and more broadly, SSC networks and associations working across the jurisdiction of the city or region. Fifthly, capacity building, which introduces and explains several public policies and institutions that can help build the capacity and training services on management, governance, and other functions to empower and enable SSC organizations and enterprises to become more efficient and sustainable in the market economy, and as well as more relevant and impactful within their communities. The next chapter looks at access to finance, and it illustrates various public policy measures to facilitate the access of SCC organizations and enterprises to both public and private finance at their different stages of development, including social and solidarity finance, private and public loans, state subsidies and grants, private donations, and looking at the plus and minuses of various innovative financing instruments such as social impact bonds and complementary social currencies. Seventh looks at the access to markets, which explains the purchase and supply of and consumption of SSC goods and services in both public procurement and private markets, and outlines public policies to facilitate SSC access to both types of markets. The eighth chapter looks at SSC communication strategy for awareness raising and advocacy in order to inform individuals, groups, other government officials who are not yet aware of SSC and its benefits. And finally, the mapping of social and solidarity organizations and enterprises, research and data collection, which introduces key areas of research and data collection methods for SSC, looking both at the more conventional methods that have been honed in more advanced countries, as well as some innovative approaches to better map SSC organizations that fall below the radar of administrative registers, organizations that work primarily in the informal sector. So each of these chapters are conceived to be read independently, but as I mentioned, they're all interrelated. So the format for each chapter is an introduction, a main body that covers the details of the subject matter, its scope, and the relevant policy options or shortcomings of policies relevant to that theme. And then a guidance section, which provides a checklist or flowchart of questions and possible answers of the reader to guide strategic investigations of the stakeholders' context and processes to improve the current policies and institutions, and also pointing to relevant information that may be found in the other chapters. So I'll just, if I have time, give just an example of one of the chapters on access to markets for SSC, which of course is absolutely fundamental for their development and sustainability. So basically, from a public policy point of view, there's the option to really strengthen and expand public procurement opportunities for SSC enterprises, and that can take two routes. One is to integrate SSC in increasingly used, let's say, criteria of socially and environmentally responsible public procurement, where SSC can build itself a niche within a broader range of enterprises that would qualify, but do not necessarily respect all the SSC criteria, or go the direct route of reserved contracts specifically for enterprises and organizations that meet the SSC criteria defined in that particular jurisdiction. Now, what we've noticed is that SSC remains a very small proportion of public procurement, even in jurisdictions where there's a clear political commitment to support SSC through public procurement. And part of the hurdle is that the lack of training needed to overcome widespread mentality of the lowest price only criteria among public procurement officials that really look at, what is the cheapest for a particular service, rather than looking at the broader benefits, social and environmental benefits that SSC can bring to the wider sustainability agenda of the government. So the costs that are otherwise externalized in more conventional enterprise action. And then the second major market is private markets, either directly with consumers or with other businesses, whether these are other SSC enterprises or more conventional enterprises that would like to operate.
Amish, you have 3 minutes left.
Okay, so this can be done through direct and indirect regulation, matchmaking platforms like the ones that we saw illustrated in Seoul, and marketing campaigns and fairs, where SSC certification is absolutely crucial to ensure that the products bought are genuinely SSE, detailed in greater length in the chapter on legal frameworks. So to conclude briefly, there are a number of cross-cutting themes throughout the chapters and indeed the different case studies. The first is the need for policy co-construction between the public sector and SSE actors to ensure the policies developed correspond to the real needs and conditions on the ground. And this process of continuous policy dialogue needs to be understood by governments not as a cost, but an indispensable investment to avoid the risks of policy failure and the consequent squandering of resources. And we have examples of that in some of the case studies. There is a need to ensure long-term political continuity beyond the political cycles, which tend to be much shorter than SSE territorial development strategy, which is much longer term. And well, ideally, this can be much better secured if there's a legal institutionalization of SSE or a sort of legal lock-in of SSE policy, which is harder to dismantle if there's a change of policy. But also, and that can go in tandem, is to really get much greater buy-in of the socio-economic benefits of SSE across political parties. And then I'll just won't go into the two final key areas, which is how to integrate and mainstream SSE in these wider development plans of the territory, and the difficulty and challenge of communicating the transformative value and economic weight of SSE among the general public and among our fellow policymakers. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Hamish. Actually, all those 7 case study papers have been translated into French and Spanish, so they are available in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and French. You can find those articles on our website, UNRISD website. And the guidelines itself is very exciting document. It is so exciting that it has been translated into 5 languages so far: French, English, Spanish, and make a guess. Which languages would there be? 2 more languages: the Vietnamese, and Tagalog for the Filipinos and Filipinas. So it's a very exciting document. You can follow the questions and answers to explore relevant information and insights, which can help you to develop the policies in your local context. So I encourage you to look at those documents on our website. I will open the floor to have questions and comments. Maybe you can turn on your camera to show your best side, and then you can raise your questions. If there's no question, maybe we can go back to our common questions for panelists. No? Okay, maybe we can go back. Okay, so I don't see any questions from the audience. So we can go back to our common questions. We have 2 forward-looking questions and 2 backward questions. I will open the floor. Any of you, including panelists and participants, if you have any answer to any of these questions, maybe you can share your thoughts with us. Anybody? Alan, I have Alan and no more. So let's go for Alan. Alan,
thanks very much, John. And you know, I think what we've heard from panelists, I have to say I couldn't understand everything because my language skills are poor. But you know, we get a kind of common theme, don't we, about what social economy organisations get involved in. You know, they're related to community resistance, social movements, or they're reacting to problems that people are experiencing, maybe around housing, maybe around drug abuse, you know, those social problems. And they show that, you know, there's the kind of longevity, they survive through really, really adverse conditions. And, you know, we experience here the taking away of grants, for example, and the need to raise money in different ways to keep them going on a shoestring budget in many, many cases. And what's interesting there is that kind of resilience that they build up. And, you know, and the way that it's often seen to be kind of different from, you know, what's seen to be good for an economy in general, where, you know, we'd say, for example, entrepreneurship and investments is good for an economy. But what we see often in the social economy is types of entrepreneurship and is types of investments, albeit some, you know, often not financial investments. And I think, you know, there's things that can be transferred from the social economy into the wider economy. And that's why I think when there are questions about, you know, inclusion, a more inclusive world, we can't take them separate from some of the big challenges we've got, particularly around climate disaster, for example, and social and economic inequality. And we should be engaging with the social economy to address those questions. And my experience is even with the best will in the world, the social economy isn't invited to some of those discussions because they seem to be more real and more about business or more about kind of innovation or something. And we've got to think about ways in which we can kind of cross that, you know, cross that line into the more mainstream political and economic debates, I think.
Thank you very much. I think we may have different experiences about, you know, SSE engaging with those big questions, inequality and climate change, because in some continents, they are much more active in the debates on those issues. Could anybody share about their experiences about this kind of a relationship between SSE and big questions like climate change and social and economic inequality? Nancy, I can see Nancy and Margie. Okay.
obviously we were, you know, and again, it's very much related to our experience in Quebec of social economy being born and supported and pushed forward by social movements, be it the women's movement, be it the, you know, the community-based movement against, you know, social exclusion, be it even the labor movement that was a very important partner for us in many aspects of the beginnings of the social economy. And particularly now with young people. And I guess just to refer to, you know, and I think it's a link that we don't make enough in underscoring the importance of the social and solidarity economy is, you know, if we look at the issue of climate, which obviously, you know, young people around the world, not just young people are, you know, very mobilized and very concerned. You know, GSEF, the group of international group of experts on climate, said that we are not going to solve the climate, the ecological crisis with the same economic logic that has dominated. You know, so when we talk about the social economy here, we always talk about it not just as I say, an end in of itself, but as a way of organizing the communities, you know, the economy based on needs, aspirations, and in a sustainable vision. And in that context, you know, I think those links are extremely important and have to be accelerated. And to talk about, you know, to react to Alan in terms of it affecting the rest of the economy, I think that is, you know, there's studies that have shown even in consumer markets, the presence of a cooperative will have the, you know, the impact of lowering prices, even if they don't control the market. You know, we saw it in Quebec where we had, you know, private funeral homes and so on, and the cooperative movement said, no, you know, a time where we lose a loved one is not a time for it to be a money-making, you know, ching-ching kind of thing. And so that created funeral cooperatives, and that lowered the cost of, you know, of funerals across Quebec. So all this to say that we're seeing, you know, a lot of even pink washing, a lot of, you know, enterprises that are trying to to be more socially responsible. And that's where the social and solidarity economy is important, not in and of itself, but also to show that despite what we were told for decades and decades, that there's only one way to run an economy, it's a neoliberal trickle-down economy, that is not true. It has not worked. Even the OECD and the IMF shows that. But there is another way, and we can succeed, and that has an impact, I think, not just on the collective economy, the social economy, but also on the public economy and on the private economy. So I would say that those links are extremely important for us to make.
Thank you very much. Margie?
I'm not surprised that we both raised our hands instantly. So let me just sort of not repeat what Nancy said, but maybe, take that one step further. If we look at the mainstream world and the dominant, and those who, promote the dominant paradigm, as soon as there is criticism coming from that world, people wake up and listen. I'm thinking of people such as Mark Carney and his new book on value. The world is discovering value. Mariana Mazzucato, who I don't necessarily see as mainstream, but she's being mainstreamed because of the coincidence of people like Carney and others that are waking up and saying, our dominant paradigm has failed us. Then if we go into more our world and again, the importance of theory, we see a huge literature on the foundational economy, on the generative economy. That's the social and solidarity economy. So I think we're maybe I'm being too hopeful and too optimistic, but I think we're experiencing a convergence of ideas that are emanating out of more progressive theorizing and conceptualization. The mainstream critics who are aware that they're that the dominant paradigm is bankrupt. And then if I just go back into our own story in Quebec, I think a very important moment, and it refers to this, this analysis, was many years ago when Nancy was still the director general of the Chantier de l'économie sociale, which is the network of networks, when she was invited to be part of the public debates on provincial budgets, where previously you would have had business, obviously government, and the labor movement, because it is very well organized. The social economy was present, so that it's really important that we don't commercialize everything, that we don't transform social services only into public markets, but also that we are not only seen as providers of social services, we have to be part of the economic model. And I think it's happening, and this convergence of mainstream critics, progressive theories, as I say, perhaps I'm too optimistic, but I think that this is promising, and very paradoxically helped by COVID, and the necessity to not throw away that toolbox, but recognize that it needs additional tools, new tools, and then perhaps some of the old tools will just disappear.
Thank you very much, Margie. I think it is quite important to be involved in the discourse on big issues like climate change and inequality, but it is also important to make kind of discursive alliance. I'd like to share my experience within the UN system. We have a very small group called Alternative Economies Discussion Group within UN system, including all those UN staffs with alternative economic ideas, ranging from blue economy, green economy, purple economy, creative economy, frugal economy, and social economy. The problem is all those guys who support each economy, circular economy, frugal economy, they are very much sticking to their own ideas and concepts, and they do not know much about other alternative economic approaches. So, for instance, those guys who are supporting circular economy do not know much about social and solidarity economy. Who are, those guys who are arguing for purple economy, which are very much related to care services provided by social and solidarity economy, do not know much about social and solidarity economy. So I think, if we want to make discursive alliance to include all those guys who are trying to transform or change mainstream economic ideas, we have to know more about other alternative economic ideas to identify linkages between social and solidarity economy and other alternative approaches to economy. I think that is my kind of a 2 cents based on my experience within UN system. Okay, anybody else? I have Susan and Normal. Okay, Susan, the floor is yours.
Okay, you know that there was a speech, I think it's the OECD, they came together, and Bill Drayton is the founder and the president of Ashoka. And he mentioned a very interesting thing. He said that no business will survive in the next coming years if they don't become change makers. And when we think of change makers, we think of the social and solidarity economy. So I think that that kind of thinking is indeed very to be welcomed, and that it points to a direction where the responsibility of changing the inequality in the world cannot be carried only by the SSE, but it should be carried by all businesses in the world.
Thank you, Susan. And anybody else? No? From the audience? Ruth, do you have anything to add? And okay, Ruth and Roberto. Ruth, you don't have anything to add?
Me?
Yeah.
I have written. Okay, thank you to all of you. Just two questions. The first one for me is the criteria of selection of the cases, because here in Latin America, I think we have a lot of experience of local social and solidarity policies, and the case of Mexico City, it has a lot of criticisms. So how do you construct this? And the second one is the first steps of the co-construction process. If maybe somebody can share here with us. I know we don't have much time, but in a general context, as we have in Argentina of a mono-constructive practices, this is very illuminating for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, for the second question, I think Margie and Nancy will be delighted to have 2-hour or 3-hour discussion with you. So maybe you can reach them to have discussion. And the selection of case studies, I think we've been discussing about what kind of cases we have to select. And from Latin and Central America, we selected just one case. But I think we thought maybe there will be following research and study which can explore more about Latin America, because as you said, we have too many cases in Latin America, so it may need standalone research on Latin America. So next time, if we have a chance, I mean, we will go for Latin American studies as a standalone project. And that will be, your question about Mexican case will be linked to Roberto. So Roberto, the floor is yours.
Pues muchas gracias. Bueno, yo no voy a hablar sobre la selección.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm not going to talk about the selection of case studies. But in that same line of thought, as Ruth was saying, in one way or another, in our Latin American reality, our context is so particular that after listening to all the different experiences from different countries as presented today, well, let's just say that the Latin American case is not that straightforward. The Article 25 of the Mexican Constitution speaks of ejidos, which is a specific type of collectivity in Mexico and cooperatives and other collectivities. The ejido, as known in Mexico, is a very specific collectivity of rural workers in Mexico, and these ejidos cover over 60% of the national territory. It's a very specific type of private food production, but with a very strong collective spirit. And this needs explaining because it's difficult to understand the rural reality of different Latin American countries, be it Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia. They're all different, but we need to take into account this rurality of our context. Now, in the case of Mexico, more particularly, Ruth, I wanted to mention this Article 25 of the Constitution that recognizes the different social and solidarity economy bodies that work, that focus on cooperatives. And they cover several types of social and solidarity economy, but not all. And this is just a general criticism of social and solidarity economy in Mexico. Now, when it comes to the city of Mexico, well, sadly, what happened here is that everything became too bureaucratic. There was simply too much red tape. And all we want to do was achieve goals. We wanted to build cooperatives without actually training cooperativists, if you like, i.e. specific actors who are involved in the construction of SSE. Indeed, there is a lot to say here. I wish I had more time. And it's definitely an interesting debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go for Hamish. I mean, Hamish, do you have anything to add to what we have discussed? Any issue? Hamish?
No, I'll second what Ruth said. Indeed, I mean, co-construction is actually critical from the outset, and we've seen this across all the case studies. And you mentioned Mexico City as a case that was maybe not so good as other Latin American examples. Well, actually, the case study showed quite accurately what happens when the co-construction process breaks down. The authors explained very well that once there was a turnover of the approach of co-construction, the quality of the capacity building programs deteriorated drastically. The details are explained in that case study. And indeed, there are many, actually, the research for the guidelines drew on other examples than the 7 case studies, and we drew heavily from experiences from Latin America, including from Brazil during the Lula years. We have an extraordinary example of an SSC development plan that became an integral part of the national development plan. And actually, a lot of innovation was done through cooperation between the Federal Secretariat dealing with SSC and the Brazilian network, the Brazilian Solidarity Economy Forum, to actually bring these programs across the country and also do this mapping exercise of SSC organizations that fall through the cracks of the official registers and statistics through new methods of doing snowballing research that reached out to a very large number of enterprises and associations that otherwise would not have been visible and received support. I mean, the Brazilian example also shows the importance of what I mentioned about political continuity between the political cycles and what happened in Brazil at the federal level with the new current regime. that dismantled basically everything that was done at the federal level. But thanks to the fact that a number of states within Brazil actually passed legislation or had programs in place that were able to continue despite the shutdown of the federal support. So it's a huge blowback, but at least not everything was swept aside. And likewise, Ecuador is a case that would be very interesting to study, especially during the years of Rafael Correa. I mean, for example, this idea of
I have to intervene. I mean, you are about to start another seminar on Latin American cases, so maybe you can wrap up what you want to say.
Yeah, well, that was the last point I was going to say, which is that as an example of direct regulation in terms of private market access to SSC products, the Ecuadorian government had put in place a certain proportion of goods that in supermarkets that had to be sourced from the SSC sector. And that really created a huge boost in market opportunities for SSC actors in Ecuador.
Thank you very much. You know, all these papers and the guidelines have been designed or pushed by Laurence Kwok. When she approached us to discuss about this idea on public policy guidelines at the local level. And UNRISD was just the implementer of this brilliant woman's idea, making guidelines. So I'd like to invite Laurence Kwok to have a closing remark. Laurence, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Il Chang. Well, I think, first of all, I think I would like to respond to Ruth that as he just explained, that it was an idea of GSEF that we would like to share some of experience developed by our member cities. So we were not looking for a city which has an ideal model or ideal initiative. We wanted to show a different stage of local government who are engaged with social solidarity economy actors with great success, but also with a lot of difficulties at different stage of their partnership and also their strategy to promote and develop social solidarity economy. So I would like to say first, this series of 7 city case is not the illustration of ideal model or successful stories. I think that it is our strong belief that each city, each local government, or each authority has to find its own way to build a partnership, strong partnership, but institutional partnership with social solidarity economy actors, and this has to be very contextualized. And I think that there are not so many actually well evidenced research about the public policies of cities and local government at our disposal. So we wanted to start it. So I would say that with a lot of probably shortcomings and lack of certain evidences, but we wanted to start with some of our member cities with whom that we are constantly engaged in dialogue, promoting more mutual learning and exchange of practice. Of course, I think based on those experience, that guidelines was conceived with a great dedication of Hamish and very hard work. And we wanted to initiate a framework that orient really civil servant and local and national government officials who are interested to embark on this journey. So as I said at the very beginning, that we are engaged in various capacity building programs because there are many, many demands are coming to us. And as they don't have any other more institutional and official training programs offered to the local government officials. They appreciate a lot of these materials and also exchange with other cities. I think they are very open, very inspired, not only by success stories, but also by a lot of challenges, difficulties that those cities and local governments are encountered, and how they are working actually to solve and to respond them. And so my concluding message would be what actually that Thierry has already written in the chat box. I think we really have to collect those informations about the initiative and engagement of public authorities, both national and local governments, but also all social solidarity economy actors to build a kind of cartography both at national, local, national, and international level. I think those informations will be a very important tool and I would say the bank for others to get engaged and also to design their own journey. I also support very strongly suggestion coming from Helen Heap, that I think local mapping and understanding of the scale, scope, and value of social solidarity economy is really an important first step in putting social solidarity economy on the agenda for local, regional, and national government. And I think it was experienced in Seoul, it was experienced in Liverpool, it's experienced in Montreal, and I hope that it will continue this way. It will be the experience of every single city, country, of this planet. So I think I'm inviting all of you, and Ruth, you can start with Argentina, and we would like to see more people, more groups, and more stakeholders engaged in mapping of those practices, and to build a mutual learning ecosystem where we could also inspire with each other, and also we could support with each other's effort. So thank you very much for this section. I think it was very inspiring and interesting. I think each and every time I found that we are learning much more, and we are getting to better understand. And that's how I think we are building a collective wisdom and collective knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will stop the discussion at this session, but nothing can turn us around from keep discussing about the ways to reach the justice, better world for all the human beings and the planet. Thank you very much for participating in this session. Take care and each other.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the speakers, all the participants, and particularly also to Il Chang. Thank you.